To kick off this afternoon, it gives me great pleasure, I have to say that because we're in the same team, to introduce David Cuckow, BSI's Knowledge Solutions Director of Digital. David leads our standard strategy on digital, helping industries and governments adopt emerging technologies and embed best practices. His work focuses on transforming business process and cultural for social and economic benefit. David will provide an overview of AI and the emerging technology standards landscape and emerging priorities. So David, it's over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Somewhat worrying when your boss has to read your job description. Clearly doesn't actually know genuinely what I do. So I am going to be with you and a team of fantastic panelists over the next hour and a half. As Anne said, we will be using Slido towards the very end. So we're going to have a bit of fun. This is a bit of AI fun. So hold on to yourself. Let's get very excited and let's kind of enjoy the afternoon. Before we kick off, I just wanted to kind of set the scene for the next 5 or 10 minutes about the topic we're going to be talking about, which is fundamentally, well, it's technology, but more importantly, it's about AI. And when thinking about this speech, we started thinking about digital as a sector, my team, back in 2019. And it started actually at a time when organizations were really thinking about the challenges of AI. And back in 2019, which he delivered a speech to the UN General Assembly, Boris Johnson, if you remember him, controversial, I know, delivered, and he was a great speaker, he delivered a very vivid and cautionary address to the UN General Assembly about the dangers and promises of emerging technology, particularly AI, which is the topic we're going to talk about, and the digital revolution. He said many things in his speech at about midnight, 1 o'clock on a very cold, windy November evening. And I'm not sure there was many in the audience, but you can see it online. It is a super speech. He gave warnings about a dystopian future where smart cities, voice assistants, and ubiquitous sensors could lead to constant surveillance and loss of privacy. He described a world where Alexa will be watching you, as it probably actually already is. And even your mattresses and fridge freezers could monitor your behavior. Now, I get the fridge freezer bit. I'm not sure he's right about the mattress. If anybody has a AI-powered mattress, please raise it on Slido later, and we can discuss it in more detail. He likened the growing cloud of data to a giant dark thundercloud looming over humanity, with people having little control over how or when it might burst. He questioned how society would deal with algorithms making life-altering decisions such as mortgage approvals, a medical condition, or insurance claims, asking, how do you plead with an algorithm? This is an interesting question. Whilst warnings of the risk, he also acknowledged the positive potential of technology, such as neural interfaces helping the deaf to hear and the blind to see, and mobile banking empowering people in developing countries. He compared the digital revolution to past scientific breakthroughs, like the printing press and nuclear power, capable of both great good and great harm. Above all, which is why we're here this afternoon, he emphasized the need for global standards that underpin ethical oversight in the development of AI and digital technologies. And fundamentally, that's what we're here to talk about. So finishing on Boris, put him aside for one moment. So without these standards, the world will be, or would be, a much riskier, less reliable, disconnected, and inefficient place. Standards are like air, if you think about it, invisible yet vital. So just like air, which is essential to breathing and sustaining life, standards ensure safety, quality, and sustaining life. Standards ensure safety, quality, and interoperability in countless products and services we rely on today. Though they might seem technical, in some respects boring and irrelevant, their impact is profound and far-reaching, playing a critical role in the way we often don't immediately notice, which is why we need standards in place to support new technologies like AI. AI does bring major benefits to consumers like personalized services, faster support and smarter tools, but also raises serious concerns. These include privacy risks, biased decision-making, and a lack of transparency in how AI will operate. Misuse is already happening, as Boris predicted. Deepfake is spreading disinformation, not misinformation, I got that right. AI scams mimic voices to defraud people. Facial recognition is used without consent. To stay safe, consumers should be cautious with their data. Use trusted platforms that support trusted standards and support ethical AI practices and good regulation. AI is rapidly evolving, as we all know, into a more general multimodal technology capable of handling complex tasks across text, imaging, and audio. And we'll come back to that a little bit later in the next hour. It is set to transform industries from automating workflows and accelerating scientific discoveries to enhance creativity and personal productivity through intelligent agents. AI is becoming more embedded in our daily lives, in literally everything that we're doing. Regulation, ethics, and human AI collaboration will take center stage over the next few years. With smarter hardware and better oversight, AI will be faster, safer, and more accessible to all, reshaping how we work, create, and interact with these types of technologies. So over the next hour and a half, we will delve more into the crucial topic of standards and how they relate to AI, which are the foundations of ensuring that AI is developed and used responsibly. AI is a powerful tool that is becoming increasingly integrated into our daily lives, but like any powerful tool, it needs guidance and guide rails to ensure that it's safe and effectively used. Standards, just so we're very clear what they are, standards are agreed upon guidelines that ensure consistency and quality. Unlike regulation, which often gets conflated, which are legally binding rules enforced by authorities, or policies, which are strategic plans or principles adopted by organizations and governments to guide decisions and actions, standards provide a framework for best practice. Together, these elements create a holistic approach to governance, ensuring businesses operate within legal and ethical boundaries, promoting fairness, safety, and innovation. Standards often inform the creation and enforcement of regulation. Whilst policies set the overarching goals and principles, both standards and regulations aim to achieve. AI standards are not about restricting innovation, which is often a critique that we get. They are actually there to accelerate and enhance the development of innovation. They provide an essential framework for developers to identify potential problems early and build in those safeguards. This ensures that AI systems are robust, transparent, and accountable. Transparency and our ability to contest AI, back to the challenge of how do we plead with an algorithm, are absolutely vital. And we need to be able to understand how those AI systems will make decisions, to be able to question those decisions, and to be held accountable, especially if those decisions impact our lives, our safety, and our sustainability. One key aspect of AI standards is promoting equality or equity. AI has the potential to perpetuate existing biases if not carefully managed. Standards mandate the use of bias detection and mitigate techniques throughout its development, ensuring that AI systems are inclusive and accessible to everybody, regardless of their background. Standards also play a crucial role in fostering innovation through interoperability. By establishing a common language for AI systems, standards ensure different systems work together seamlessly, paving the way to advancements in areas like personalized medicine and smart cities. Governance is also very crucial and is where AI standards are essential. They provide a framework for ethical and safe development of AI, ensuring that AI systems are used for the benefit of humanity and not the other way around. International collaboration is key, and we're starting to see more of this, such as the Digital Compact, Global Digital Compact, collaborations with ISO, IEC, and the ITU. As AI is a global phenomenon, it is without borders and it's boundless. And we need to consider efforts to align and implement standards effectively across the globe. Collaboration in AI standards is vital for ensuring global consistency. And unfortunately, we're seeing fragmentation, particularly in the area of regulation already. Leveraging diverse expertise and fostering interoperability, which accelerates innovation and addresses ethical and society challenges. These are the key things we need to focus on. It promotes fairness and inclusivity, prevents harmful use, builds public trust, and ensures equitable access to AI to benefit all. To give you some examples of some of the things we're doing, BSI, as the UK national standards body, is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners, such as the Alan Turing Institute and MPL, as partners in the AI Standards Hub, which we launched about 18 months, 2 years ago. It's achieved an awful lot over that time. It's a first of its kind and a shining example of international collaboration in action. A UK initiative funded and supported by UK government, dedicated to advancing trustworthy and responsible AI. The hub brings together key partners, world-class academia and research, standard setting and metrology, but also industry, government, regulators, consumers, civil society, and world-leading academics to shape the debate about AI standardization as we go forward. But clearly, it's all about promoting the ethical use of AI and ethical AI governance. But we also provides a navigation for AI. I mean, AI standardization is very complex, unnecessarily so, and we're trying to make it simple and easier for people to navigate quite the complex world of governance of AI. The UK Bridge AI programme, which is funded by Innovate UK, is there to accelerate the adoption of responsible, trustworthy artificial intelligence across the UK in what is deemed by government as low uptake sectors, such as agriculture, construction, and logistics. It provides funding, training, and expert support to help businesses integrate AI effectively and ethically and responsibly. BSI is a strategic partner in the programme, and we're playing a key role in helping innovators and new organisations and SMEs embed AI, international standards in AI into what they're doing, such as ISO IEC 42001, which I'm sure we'll delve into later. So BSI's role is ensuring that AI adoption is aligned with best practices at a global level, helping organisations build that trust and manage risk, and preparing us all for the future. So in conclusion, before we move on to the panel, it is vital that by facilitating international cooperation, we can tackle global issues more effectively and continuously with an improved AI to reflect evolving technologies and challenges at pace. AI standards are about shaping the future where AI serves humanity and not the other way around. Will we develop helpful robots, washing and caring for our aging population, or as Boris said, red-eyed Terminators sent back from the future to cull the human race? It's not the first time he referred to the Terminator, as many will know. Will AI-powered synthetic biology stand for the restoring of livers and our eyes with miracle AI regeneration of tissues? As Boris said, like some fantastic hangover cure, and he would know. Or will it bring terrifying limbless chlorinated chickens to our tables? Let's hope it's not one of those. AI standards will ensure that AI is developed responsibly. That's really the key principle. Use ethically and benefit everybody. We can continue to navigate an evolving landscape of AI. All of us must stay informed and engaged and in those discussions about AI ethics and governance, and to advocate for standards that reflect our key values. So we will now move to a panel discussion. And I would firstly like to invite Laura Bishop to the stage, who's going to moderate the panel. You might need to come up and take a seat for a moment. I would next like to invite Javier Ruiz Diaz, Director Policy Advisor at the Consumer International. Liz Coll, Founder, Connected Consumers. Welcome, Liz. Teresa Moreira, Head Competition and Consumer Policies Branch, Division of International Trade and Commodities at UNCTAD. And last but very not least, Josh Smith, Senior Data Analyst at Which. And I will hand over to Laura and sit down.
Thank you, David, for that very powerful and thought-provoking speech. And I have to say that because he's my boss. So I'm actually really looking forward to this session, especially the interactive part, because it's your opportunity to make the panel nervous by guiding conversation around what you want to know more about around the consumer and AI. But first, before we kick off, I would like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their experience and their organization. David's already introduced himself, so if we can start with you, Josh, and then move around.
Hi, so a two-part introduction here, if that's okay. So I work for Which. We are the Consumer Association. Our mission, which I love for its clarity, is to make life simpler, fairer, and safer for consumers. And I think I wanted to echo something that David said in his introduction, that it's crucial that as part of that, we ensure that the AI that's being developed, the standards that are being developed to guide it, is used ethically and benefits everybody. I love that way of putting it. And that it's all consumers that reap the benefits and avoid the harms of this technology, and not just a model user of these systems. I think we do that in two ways. I think the first way is to involve the consumer voice in the way that these systems are developed. And the second is that we as kind of civil society organizations need to be on top of making sure that we identify harm and squash it, or at least talk about it to kind of raise harms as we see them coming up.
Thank you very much, Josh. That's great. Teresa?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And just allow me to thank BSI for the invitation. I'm very impressed with the audience, which is not the audience I usually interact with. And I already learn a lot and expect to continue learning. So I am the head of the Competition and Consumer Policies branch of what is now called United Nations Trade and Development, better known as UNCTAD, which is a small UN organization devoted to promote international trade and development related areas, which include investment, technology, logistics, and of course, competition and consumer policies. UNCTAD, for almost 10 years, has been conferred the very powerful role of being the custodian of the United Nations guidelines for consumer protection, when they were revised for the second time and really expanded and improved. And the guidelines, when revised, established the only truly international forum for discussing consumer protection issues at intergovernmental level. So we hold this annual intergovernmental group of experts meetings on consumer protection every year. But even though, of course, we are intergovernmental organization, we have a multi-stakeholder scope, and the revision of the guidelines have really benefited from contributions from other public bodies from member states, but also from civil society, from consumer associations, from business associations, from academia. So I think it's very much it's very much in line, I think, with the challenges that we are discussing today, because they touch all of us as consumers, but also all of us as professionals in some sort of capacity, and all of us as entrepreneurs or workers, etc., etc. I wanted just to mention, since this is a BSI conference, that the revised guidelines for consumer protection, not surprisingly, have extensive references to the contribution of standards to effective consumer protection. So for the first time, the guidelines encompass good business practices. Of course, they talk about and recommend highly standards for the product safety and quality of consumer goods and services, but also for e-commerce, for financial services, for sustainable consumption, etc., etc. I think I will take it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Liz, would like to hear more about you?
Hi, my name's Liz Coll, and I founded Connected Consumers in 2020 after working with UK and international consumer groups for a number of years, including some of the ones here and standards bodies, and lots of people who are here at the conference as well. I think the purpose of Connected Consumers is to really help organisations understand the experience of consumers in a digital world, and really what it feels like, and then working with them to put back a lot of things which I think we may have lost as technologies develop. So to put power, confidence and choice back into consumers' hands so that they can do with technology what they want. Thinking about safe, fair, inclusive AI and the way that that's described, I'd say let's start with the basics of what we know of people's experience of digital, connected, sophisticated digital worlds. We already know that they want the best from it. They want quality, interesting, enjoyable services, but they don't want to have to compromise on choice, on safety, on privacy and autonomy. And increasingly, I think many of us probably feel like we are sort of compromising quite a bit on those things to have access to what is pretty good technology out there. And I think AI is no different. Yes, it's really sophisticated. Yes, it's got a very transformative potential and is already having a transformative impact because it can cut across so many sectors, from like the military to the arts or to banking and health, and it can be applied to so many different tasks. It's also, I think, captures the imagination because it's rolling out at such a high speed, but it's also part of this environment of digital services, tools, platforms, apps, devices that we are quite well accustomed to now. And some of the same feelings we have about the general digital world when you ask consumers what they feel and what they want are the same as they are for AI. So they're really positive about all the new innovations, about solving some really big, intractable global problems around the environment and around health, making life a bit easier. But they're also really worried about loss of control, manipulation, losing access to human care, human judgment. They're worried about people being discriminated against. And I think instead of seeing those as like, problems we need to sort of tell people to stop worrying about, let's take those and say, well, what can we do to address that? And what does that look like? And I think that comes back to a lot of the things that David was talking about. That's about having systems that are robust and which can identify where harms might take place and put things in to stop them.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Javier.
Hi, I am Javier Ruiz. I am originally of Spanish background, but I live in the UK, some kind of partly British here. But I've been working in an international context for many years. I in the slide said, I'm actually no longer, I'm not here speaking on behalf of Consumers International, but we have a very good relation. But I was a digital advisor at Consumers International. I work with the Center for Inclusive Trade Policy at the University of Sussex as well, and I also do like a lot of consultancy with many groups. And I think that I'm here coming from a slightly different place. So standards are fairly new to me in many ways. I came into consumer rights from the digital space, from digital policy, digital rights, and through there, one thing that I found is that there is actually a lot of noise in terms of AI and innovation and a million different projects to create new principles and guidelines and things. So one thing that for me would be interesting, I find interesting, is that the process of agreeing standards may be able to cut through some of that noise and actually set something that is actually a little bit more solid. So in terms of, when I was thinking, how can I bring something that is not, so we don't repeat each other, basically, because we all share, I think, the same concerns as everyone in this room about like safety. And I thought one of the areas coming from the digital space was the idea of the consumers also being empowered, particularly. So this idea of that consumers are not just passively receiving these things, but they're also involved in creating. And I think that that's something that we also need to remember. I mean, there are, I think I was looking this before, there calculations of something like 110 or 118 million people using generative AI tools right now. That's only a fraction of those that are affected by other types of AI tools when they're looking for a job or trying to get the price for an airline ticket. So, but if we look there, I mean, the access to information and the production of information, a lot of that is basically a layering of a new technology on top of things that were already in place on the internet and digital technologies. Of course, that there are, and some of the challenges that we faced before are still there. So access to a technology, everyone can go into ChatGPT or DeepSeek if you feel like it. But if you want to have access to some of the higher level models, you will have to pay between 75 and 200 pounds a month to have access to the latest, to the quality model. So issues, access, many things that we've been talking about for 20, 30 years, they are still there. They don't disappear, they just get another layer. That's not the AI layer. And then, of course, when it comes to the something which is the trust in information, being able to access, what is there. I think the idea of trustworthiness of the information generated, that is obviously a huge thing. And there is also an interesting conundrum, which is that a lot of the quality of the AI depends on the data that it takes. So garbage in, garbage out is what people tend to see. And that presents a difficult question because, of course, we are in this position where we are training the AI with everything that we are doing in all our daily lives. And at the same time, we are hoping that the AI works, but for it to work, we are supposed to contribute. And we are in this kind of cycle where we are both contributing to the system, both taking from the system. There is a big discussion in the UK right now about the copyright of training data that at the moment is being framed as a conflict between creative industries and tech industries. But actually, all of us are a part of that conflict. We are all caught in between, that position of wanting to benefit from the technology and also at the same time potentially being exploited by that technology. So I think that that is something that is that for me is quite important to explore. Then, obviously, that's not to say that all the traditional issues that we have, are not important. I think I'm very, very interested, particularly in the liability and redress, because I think, everything that I personally, right now, I bought a control system for my heating, and I'm embroiled in a battle between the vendor, the manufacturer, the installer, and the distribution to see who's responsible with the thing not working. And no one knows. That's the problem. The thing is not connecting to the internet, and no one knows why it's not connecting to the internet, and they're all passing the ball. Again, put the layer of AI on top of that, and you have a much more compounded problem. So in this situation, in terms of thinking where could we go? I think, again, going back to some of the basics, I think interoperability and the idea that was raised before, that is going to be a big, important thing for consumers, not to be stuck in one place. But also, like some of the questions around power, competition, who is benefiting from this, the conflict that we have between the different regulatory spaces. I think the UK had a big process a few years ago about having an AI regulator, where the policy became to not have one, but to instead have AI distributed, and we have some regulatory cooperation forums, but it's all still a bit unclear, who is responsible, how do we enforce all of this? So I think that those are some of the old questions, they come back, and now they have the AI icing on the cake. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your introductions. I mean, that's already been some great contributions to this discussion already. I realise I haven't fully introduced myself, so I will just quickly say that, Laura Bishop, and I'm at BSI as their digital sector lead in AI and cybersecurity. By trade, I am a human technology psychologist, so if you do hear me mention any psychology today, I am supposed to know what I'm talking about. But we shall see. So, to start our discussion, we're going to pose one question to each of our panelists. We're going to start, first of all, with David, by asking him, what do you see the main opportunities for standards to be part of the solution to delivering fair, safe, and inclusive AI?
That's a massive question. And I probably should have prepared for it, shouldn't I? And I mean, I pick up on a couple of things that were mentioned earlier. I think for me, there's some, maybe I'm not answering the question the right way, but there are quite a few gaps in AI right now. We have some challenges in putting in the right infrastructure for AI. And what I mean by infrastructure is how do we, it is enormously energy consuming using AI. There was something in the press the other day about people, for example, asking Alexa a question or going into some ChatGPT thing and saying thank you. If you put thank you in at the end of giving the question, it actually sends the system off in complete turmoil and consumes massive amounts of energy with all these millions of people putting thank you because it thinks you're asking it a question. And that's only set to get worse. So we need to think about how we use good practice and best practice in developing AI in a much more sustainable way, which doesn't impact the environment in a more negative way than actually AI could impact the environment in a more positive way. I think that then leads on to what was mentioned here about data. Again, the question, thank you, right? You're putting data into a system that the system doesn't understand why you're asking the question. And there's been a huge amount of effort in governments thinking about governance and policy and regulation and standards in AI, but then not lots happened in the underlying data infrastructure. Now, there are lots of standards for data, but not consistent best practice in how you discover data, how you check the data for quality, then how do you use it, how do you apply it, and how it then you dispose of it. So all that complete cycle of discovery through to disposal of data is unclear. And we see this in going out and engaging organizations trying to implement AI. They really struggle. They even struggle with understanding the simple question about who owns this thing, who takes responsibility for this black box that no one really understands and doesn't really want to take responsibility because it's easy to blame the black box. So it was just AI that made the biased decision on not to offer you the job. But the problem is, it's going to get to a situation where you have to explain why the AI system did what it did. You're going to have to get to that situation. And that's where things like contestability are going to become really important. The challenge is standardization can be quite technical. It's sort of engineered. We need to find different ways of developing standards like bias and transparency, that human-centric standards that aren't engineered in a lab. They're actually all of us coming together and deciding how this should be applied for the benefit of us. And that's going to come down to more people getting involved in standardization. Having very few people that are obviously clearly knowledgeable in a room deciding what good practice or what good looks like, not enough, I don't think, in AI. It needs to be a very broad consensus view. And I think that's for us as the UK's national standards body to find better ways of engaging you in those conversations. You don't have to necessarily join a committee meeting. You can actually do it remotely using technology. And that's going to come down a lot to skills and education about us helping you get more involved in the debate, but then also educating people in how they're going to use standards that apply to new technology in the best way.
Brilliant, thank you, David. Did you want to add something then, Josh?
Yeah, you've touched on my absolute favourite subject in the world. So I'm the second part of my introduction is that I'm a data scientist at which I lead our data science team. So I'm meant to know what I'm talking about there. And just to reassure anyone who is being very polite to their AIs, there's been some kind of work into this, and being polite is more likely to get you into the space of the training set where good quality answers are requested and shared. Sometimes. So it can be a good thing. Just saying thank you, yeah, you probably are wasting some energy, but politeness can help get better answers, and that is insane, and I love it, and I wanted to just share it.
And I was going to touch on that a little bit as well, to say, if you want to be sustainable, don't be polite to chatbots for now.
The thing is, though, this is a whole entirely new language. I guess quite a few people in the room have Alexa, right? And so it's going to go off in a minute. But you have to ask Alexa the question in the right way. Otherwise, you won't get the right answer. It is quite tricky, isn't it? It's almost we've always got to create a new language that the machine's going to understand to be able to give us the right answer. It's a new undefined world we're in, which is quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Teaching consumers how to prompt engineer is something we need to do more of, for sure. So next, coming to you, Teresa. Why is global cooperation in protecting consumers important where AI is concerned?
Thank you. I did not mention that my organization has 195 members. So as I usually joke or say, we are the world, which is good, I think, representative enough. And our focus is to assist developing countries in better integrating the world economy. So we do this through bringing together the most advanced countries and the less experienced ones to share experience, knowledge, intelligence, and promote, of course, cooperation. I think AI is one of the best cases for global cooperation because, of course, it goes beyond borders, is cross-cutting, and unfortunately, the benefits and harms of AI are being distributed unequally across the world. So hence the reference to the developing countries. I think David actually already mentioned this. So let's say at least since 2017, within the UN framework, which is quite large and comprehensive, there has been work mainly by the International Telecommunications Unit Organization on this issue, but also UNESCO, and more recently, since 2023, at the UN Secretary General level, advisory groups, etc. Last year, the General Assembly adopted a number of resolutions, I would say very broad, but of course, recognizing that it is important to create global standards and frameworks, so very much in line with what we are discussing here today, but aiding developing countries, so this is like an underline for obvious reasons. At the same time, the Pact for the Future and the Global Digital Compact of September 2024 also touch upon this, and we hear principles that have been mentioned by, I think, all speakers today. The need for transparency, fairness, accountability, respect for privacy through data governance, stakeholder engagement, and a human-centric approach. Of course, you sometimes need these very general, high-level principles to send a powerful message to citizens, to businesses, to countries. But also then, of course, you need something much more concrete. And hence, for instance, the role and the opportunity of standards. But I wanted to say, from the point of view of UNCTAD, now focusing specifically on my two areas, consumer protection and competition, because, of course, market concentration is huge in all of the digital economy. And this leads to a great potential for concern for obvious reasons. So abusive practices, unfair and discriminatory access even to micro and small businesses, disrespect for consumer rights and privacy, so price discrimination in a negative sense, disrespect for privacy, the personalized advertising as a positive side, but the negative side, because now we all have been observing hyper-personalized advertising, like a pressure technique against consumers. And of course, overall, reducing consumers' autonomy, increasing the asymmetry of information between consumers and the businesses that are deploying AI, while diminishing product safety, and interestingly, having a very negative environmental impact. And on this purpose, I just wanted to mention two things. So of course, the digital divide is huge also for AI purposes. UNCTAD has released a month ago a report, which is the Technology and Innovation Report 2025, that shows clearly the divide, market concentration, even the concentration in research and development for AI purposes. So meaning this is being prolonged, so to speak. And I sent BSI a couple of slides just to illustrate it. Another report released in the fall last year, which is our digital economic report, focuses on the environmental impact of digital economy. And it is scary, the energy, the water consumption. And I think that we as consumers, as individuals, even as entrepreneurs, are not necessarily aware of this. So it is interesting because from a point of view of consumer protection and even competition, in my case, we talk about digitalization and sustainability as cross-cutting common global challenges. And yes, they are even interconnected, but also from a negative point of view. So I think it's also something important to raise awareness for. Apart from the digital divide, I wanted to say that global cooperation is also very much important to ensure data comprehensiveness, data quality, data representativeness. This was mentioned this morning, so all the biases, of course, come also from the quality of data that is being gathered. We cannot expect an AI mechanism to be more inclusive just on its own if it was not provided data that really plays a comprehensive picture of the number of vulnerabilities and inequalities that exist, namely the needs and challenges for a number of vulnerable and disadvantaged groups of consumers that were already pictured this morning. So children, for some reasons, youngsters, adults that are vulnerable because they are unemployed, because they are struggling with the cost of living crisis, that they are in countries that are under conflict or post-conflict, the elderly. And so this is extremely important, and this is something that we cannot just rely on AI developers to do this, like we cannot rely on any businesses just to cater to the whole world as far as consumers are concerned. I think this is really a responsibility of governments and of international organizations, especially the UN for obvious reasons, to highlight this. And the protection of vulnerable and disadvantaged consumers was introduced for the first time in the revised guidelines for consumer protection, and this is something, it is extremely important. So I also mentioned market concentration, and from our point of view, of course, you have consumer protection because, of course, of consumer rights, autonomy, the existing asymmetry of information, which interlinks with competition policy because it goes after market concentration externalities, so to speak, and at the same time, competition provides consumer choice, so it has a positive contribution, and data protection, the fundamental right that we have as individuals to have our data, our personal data protected. Finally, I also think that because of the regulatory fragmentation that I believe David mentioned, global cooperation is also needed. Now, this needs to be something, again, with different, how can I put it, with different scopes, because there are a lot of stakeholders involved. And I believe that, for instance, the standards community combining with the consumer protection community, I think can play a very powerful role. I do believe that more collaboration between public bodies and regulators is always needed. This is something that we are always recommending. Since at UNCTAD we do policy advice and we do research and analysis to support, of course, the policy advice and capacity building. So we need to make sure, and this is a message, a conclusion, very clear as an outcome of all these United Nations initiatives, that we need to make sure that there will be a seat at the table for developing countries, and that they will have the support, the capacity that they need to also be able to enjoy the benefits of this rapid evolving digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was so interesting, and especially the point around how some countries don't have the accessibility that others do. And then also there's bias in the data where they're not represented in the chatbot, should they be able to use them. And they're also often the countries that are part of the human reinforced feedback loop, where they sit there for very small amounts of money to interact with the chatbot before it's released to see if there's any harmful material, so the guardrails could be put up and that we don't get to see that harmful material. So they kind of get hit threefold there. So moving on to Javier, many consumers are already using or interacting with AI. Is that creating demand which is driving proliferation at a pace that good governance just can't match?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that the drivers for AI, I think on the one hand, obviously consumers are there, but there is also a lot of demand that is hidden, you know, and that not hidden from us, it's hidden, that is not so visible. For example, like the military technology, you know, like the big drivers. So when we look at the proliferation of systems, I think that at one point it's unavoidable that in this, I mean, actually, I don't come from the standards, you know, space, you know, so I can be a bit critical, you know, but I think so, like people who will complain about, you know, like front patents and, you know, like the, you know, fixing technologies. I mean, I think that it is normal that at some point that you start in a new technology, you know, with like a lot of diversity and with a lot of, you know, norms, you know. So I think that that is part of a natural process. I think the question is, at what point are we able to really start shaping things, particularly when you start seeing the impact? No? So I think that it's natural, but you would want to see a transition towards a system of norms, particularly when you're looking at international issues. So I think that in that sense, the issue with the proliferation, I think that at the moment is driven as well by some commercial interests where it's not just that there are lots of consumers. I mean, people like myself, yeah, we sign up to every AI tool known to man and more, you know, but most people don't spend, you know, all day trying different tools or seeing how it works or what the impacts are. So I think that for me, something that is quite important there is that there is a point where people are saying, well, this is something that is so new and so big that is going to change the world in ways that we don't know, but we are going to have to control it just in case. No? And that is I think, part of it. When you look at the writings of people like Dario Amodei from Anthropic, you know, he is very clearly saying, oh, we cannot let this technology fall in the hands of China. And say, well, wait a minute. I mean, that is, you know, like a very strong statement to make, you know, to like 1 billion people, you know, in the world, you know, and also, you know, what does it mean? And there is this sense of the global race on AI that I don't fully understand what it would mean to win that race, you know, and what does it mean to lose. And I think there is this idea that there's a winner takes all, you know, zero-sum game on this technology, that if you can get it, you are going to basically lock everyone out and everyone's just going to be, you know, dependent, a bit like Britain in the last half of the 19th century. You know, which is not even totally true. You know, if you look at Germany and other countries, they were doing things as well. But I think that at the moment it seems that you are able to justify anything you want in the sense that, you know, oh, sorry, we need to win the AI race. No? So we're just going to basically just do whatever. And I think that is the thing that I find also quite problematic. And I think that if we, in that sense, I mean, the question for us that's come up, like, don't say thank you to the AI. It's like, where do we put some limits? You know, do we want to actually put limits on this technology? And if we were to do so, how can we do that in a global context, which doesn't mean, and also can we do it fairly in a way that doesn't mean that we are going to lock in the power of the existing companies. So what we are seeing now is that there are calls by some of the largest developers of AI to say that, oh, we need to ban open source AI because it's too dangerous. Like anyone could use it to build a bomb. And what they're saying is like, we are the only people that are responsible enough and the only grown-up, so you need to trust us that we are not going to create a bomb, but it's basically trust us. And I think that that is not good enough. So I think that the governance that we need to find is like finding mechanisms that I hope these international spaces can provide to really make decisions over where we may want to put some hard limits on the technology, how to make sure that there is a fair technology transfer across the world, that it takes into account the old and new imbalances of power, so we don't want to see, I don't personally have an interest in seeing China or any other country locked out, but also don't want to see two countries even controlling the whole thing, I want to see it develop all around the world. So I think even the idea of accepting this kind of duopolies, that is somehow being presented would be problematic. So I think that the issues of governance, I think, not to say, they very quickly grow out of the consumer individual person going in their computer into the bigger spaces. But I think that places like ISO and international organization, or UNCTAD, they provide this kind of space where we can start having these conversations at an international level.
It's really interesting. Thank you. Liz, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think it's important we don't equate usage necessarily with demand all the time, because a lot of consumers are having to or have very little choice in whether they're using AI systems. So I'm not sure that should be interpreted always that everybody who's using it is loving it and wanting more. And an example, I work also on the UK's Legal Services Consumer Panel, which looks at consumers in legal services and how regulation can help them. And it's a statutory panel. We're going to release some research soon, which was about consumers using digital services, including AI, to meet their legal needs. And there was one interviewee who said that the AI-enabled chatbot was so terrible at answering questions that the person was just having to guess which documents to upload. So there's someone who's using AI, has willingly gone, okay, I'm going to opt to use this AI to help me, and it's worse than anything that could have come before. So I think just to caution to remember that usage isn't necessarily enthusiastic demand.
That's very true, and I think it's important to remember as well that there's a problem when humans think they're interacting with AI and they're not. So that's also an important part of the conversation. So that leads on nicely to Josh's question, which is, in your experience, do you think there is adequate transparency and choice for consumers about how and when they interact with AI? Are we all doing so without always really knowing?
Fascinating question. So I think one way to look at this is it kind of depends how online you are and how active you are on social media. Taking another angle from Liz's valid point about people and companies embedding AI in services where AI is potentially not needed, I think there's another angle here where we as consumers of kind of media are being exposed to this stuff all the time, and it sounds flippant, right? It's too easy to pick on X here, but I don't know if we have any delegates from Argentina. We recently had major elections in Buenos Aires where it suggested that faked videos shared the night before the election, widely shared, may have influenced the outcome of that election. And I think there's a danger that we as consumers are exposed to the same influence of that mendacious or kind of otherwise kind of misinforming, disinforming AI-generated content. It affects us in the same way that it affects us as voters, in that it changes the way we trust things. It changes the way that we perceive the popularity or the value or the green credentials of the stuff that we're seeing online. And I don't think we do, as consumers, have the ability to make informed choices about whether we're exposed to that content, about whether we can choose to either not see it or have it disclosed to us that stuff's being shown. So no, I don't think there are sufficient consumer protections here.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you, Josh. And I think actually Liz gets the most difficult question, and that is from the consumer point of view, who should be accountable, responsible for any harm or unsatisfactory outcomes from AI?
Well, I think Javier, with your heating system, you'd probably be a better placed to answer this. I thought about this question in terms of like, well, what is accountability for? Because we all use that word, and we use it with responsibility, liability. What's it for? And going back to some basics, it's important in any consumer interaction. And AI is no different, really. But because AI in some cases is being used to make really consequential decisions about people, so if healthcare is allocated unfairly or mortgage is denied, or I think there's the famous Air Canada case where a chatbot customer service gave someone the wrong information and the customer wasn't able to get a refund, that was then taken to court and overturned. But it's making decisions that are consequential. And so you do need a place where the buck stops and where there is somebody who's ultimately responsible for remedying the situation, first and foremost, so effective redress or compensation, and the clues in the word for giving an account of what went wrong. And then that links back very closely to transparency, because if you want to even start to figure out what flaw or what part of the system has made something go wrong, you need to have a degree of transparency. And then also sort of for making the changes to make sure that doesn't happen again. So there's quite a lot to the difficult question about accountability of what it's served to do. But ultimately, all the things that we've talked about safe data inputs and verifying different suppliers in the supply chain and transparency and consumer testing, data quality, and none of those will really become meaningful unless there is a point of accountability. I suppose the other thing that strikes me about AI is, to a degree, the consumer responsibility if something goes wrong is difficult sometimes to place. They can't opt out in many cases. They can't necessarily opt out of a system. They may not have a choice in using it. So that option to avoid harm or take responsibility or protect yourself by not using it isn't there. There's also, and this is, I don't know if Tony Allen's here, but he's works on tech standards and talks about this really interesting point about AI that it's sort of, the purpose of it is to make things easier and take decision-making away. Then you end up with a consumer who has sort of been retrained or has different behaviours where they are less on the lookout for things that could go wrong, because the very purpose of the product is to take away that burden of figuring out and thinking through all the processes. So then you're left in a position of what does that mean for the responsibility and accountability of the person using it if the system they're using or the tool they're using has sort of been designed to stop them taking protective behaviours. So I think that's just a really interesting point. I think it's called automatism. It's got a name. But I just think that's a good one for thinking about, well, shouldn't consumers be taking more responsibility or accountability? I think we know it's really important to have a clear point of accountability. We know there's lots of people in that supply chain. I think it's a bigger question for regulation and liability law to determine who that should be. But if we're thinking in terms of standards, and if you want to be an organisation that takes responsibility, accountability seriously, then there's clearly some things that you could do that standards would really help with. So whether that's ongoing monitoring of all the different systems and the performance and the outcomes, senior level people responsible for that, and response plans in place if things go wrong, regular audits or verifications of third parties. And I think critically making sure that it's not consumers who are bearing all the weight of rectifying harm and figuring out when it went wrong and getting redress, but having some transparent processes to report harm, clarity and on who, whether it's inside or outside the organisation, all of those things, which I imagine would make your life very easy that you'd like to see. But it really shouldn't be on the burden. If a whole system relying on lots of different actors isn't working for you as the person who've bought it, that really shouldn't then be your added burden to try and figure out exactly why. So I've dodged the question of saying who should be, but it's important and it needs to be incredibly clear.
Thank you. We are quite a bit over time going into the interactive session, but Josh and David, if you just want to quickly make your points.
Well, I'd love to take a quick straw poll, right? Because we're all consumers here on this consumer responsibility point. So to sharpen the question, can we have a quick show of hands if you think you could most of the time spot a piece of AI-generated content on social media, say? Show of hands, put your hands up. Most of the time you can spot it. Yeah, that's around half the room. Yes. So I put it to you that you are probably right, people who put your hands up, if you are in your emotional, cognitive best. If you are coming at that piece of content in a safe space, you're comfortable, your faculties are at their greatest. Where it is most likely to have impact, and we know this, we which have done work on scams, which show that you are most susceptible to a scam if you are emotionally exhausted, or if something terrible has happened in your personal life, or if you are anxious, or if you're depressed, or if you're tired, you're much more likely to fail the responsibility that's being put onto consumers here to notice AI-generated content or to interact with an AI-generated service in a way that actually works. That it's when consumers are not at their, cognitive 100%, that I think we are most worried about those systems failing.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you guys are going to be tested later because we're going to be doing the putting up some AI-generated content and ask you what you think. So, and we'll do that after the wine as well and see whether the decision-making is impaired. I mean, we're talking specifically here about AI, but there's some really quite fundamental questions here about society and where we're going with all of this. I think accountability is essential, particularly in AI. My wife's a teacher, and she was telling me over the weekend that they are starting to use AI, and they're using Copilot for some form of marking and responses to students, a private school. And what they're doing is on every correspondence now that goes out, they put a blanket response to say some of the elements in your child's report or in this letter may have well been generated by AI. And I'm saying, well, what sort of response are you getting from parents? And every one of them are coming back and saying, what does this mean? And what bit are you marking of their homework? And can you be very specific? And they don't know how to answer that question. And I said, well, why are you doing this? And they're just saying it's just a blanket response so that they're covered where they think they're covered, in the fact they're just declaring this. But I think people just don't understand what any of this means and who is accountable, because it's back to what we were talking about earlier, is almost like, well, if you just declare it, you can blame the black box that's whirring away in the corner, and it's their fault, it's not us as human beings that are at fault here. But she was also telling me about they're getting a lot of challenges with children that are being very disrespectful in class to teachers, and this happens almost on a weekly basis. And this goes back to this case. I can't remember the guy's name. The Matthew Tate. Andrew Tate. Mm-hmm. The children are following socially online, and they're taking some of these things that he's saying very literally, and they're applying that, because these kids are growing up, so they're asserting it on teachers, and it's very offensive. And some of the children are being excluded from school. And these are bright kids. This isn't a very, very expensive, posh school that Frank Lampard's child goes to, I think. So he's got serious money. I just wonder where this is going. And, we're talking here specifically about AI and how we regulate that and how we apply standards to support it. But I think there's some bigger societal issues here that we are changing the world with this technology. We are all entirely reliant on what's going on online and the misinformation that's going out, and how our global leaders are literally overnight changing history by posting something that is clearly untrue. But there are big sections of global society that believe entirely what's being said because that's what they follow online. And I wonder, if I think there was a survey. I saw it this morning. One of the newspapers did a survey with children, I think under the age of 18 or something, and there was quite a remarkable large amount said that they thought that they would be better off over 50% thought that the world would be, or they would be better off without the internet rather than with the internet, which I thought was remarkable, given I thought children were completely bought into this technology as being kind of the way the world works. And I think, and the reason I'm saying this, because this is our responsibility as citizens. This is not, I don't think it's government's responsibility. You know, we know governments are not going to make decisions other than all they're going to do is try and stay in power for the next 4 years. But it is our responsibility as citizens to come together and define and shape the way this technology is applied to the world. And what do we want society to be? Do we want it to be children online being rude to teachers and parents and us blaming the machine because it's the machine's fault? Or do we want to do something about it and take responsibility for our actions as citizens in society? And I think, you know, we said earlier, you know, we don't get enough people getting involved in standardization. You know, I know it's time consuming and can be complex and expensive, but we need to get more people involved in defining what good looks like, because it's more than just defining what good looks for technology. It's defining society of the future and what our environment's going to look like. I think this is such a vitally important conversation. I know I've probably gone bigger than the issues we're talking about now, but I think I fundamentally believe we need to really think very carefully about where we're going with this and how we apply this technology to the future.
Thank you. Well, because this is such an interesting conversation, and I think it was Javier who spoke about consumer empowerment. So, of course, when we talk about consumer protection, we also start with empowering consumers, informing, educating them, so that they improve their choices according to their needs, to their interests, to their challenges, to their means. And of course, this is something that is always necessary in whatever context, especially in what we are talking about, new products, new technologies. But ideally, of course, because there will always be the protection side, we say this at least for legislation and regulation, I'm sure it can also be applied to standards and even to good business practices. Couldn't also there be a stronger encouragement or incentive in the kind of, in what regards standards or good business practices for consumer-friendlier design? So we talk about privacy for design and, I don't know, children protection for design, data protection by design, and so all of that. And I think you're very right, because what is, I think, a little bit overwhelming is the number of products and services and technologies being offered without any information, minimum information, I would suggest, minimum reliable information on how best to use it. And the least point also, there have to be mechanisms that allow consumers to report, well, to complain, to report harms, to report about their experience for increased monitoring or concrete monitoring. So there's a lot of talk about AI oversight, which I think is a little bit idealistic, and I think David mentioned AI regulator. I don't necessarily think that everything is solved with new regulators, but it is true that there is an after consumer experience in AI that should be there, and that could provide a lot of interesting information, even for the businesses deploying AI, on how to adjust it, how to improve it, how to make it safer, how to make it more inclusive, how to make it fairer. So I think this is also something that needs to be out there. And if I may, I also wanted to say that, for instance, what we are doing is some developing countries, okay, those who are still lacking full digital infrastructure and sometimes skills and equipment, etc. These consumers agencies are experimenting also using AI technology to easy detect infringements, to provide consumers options to identify unfair contract terms, etc. And we are actually working on a checklist to advise them on the steps. So I think, it's one of these areas where I feel that everybody could use a piece of advice. Yeah. Of course, we would need to be in agreement on where does the advice come from. And that's why I mentioned the UN numerous initiatives. We tend to be very broad, but could be then top-down and involving all stakeholders so that we as consumers, as citizens, could benefit of more information when we are using these technologies.
I think it's also about trying to encourage organisations to follow and use the guidance and advice. I mean, if you did a survey, I suspect you find organisations will use standards and get certified against standards because they have to. It's either a regulatory requirement or they're doing it for some form of compliance within a supply or value chain. I mean, this is an example. But we need to get people using it because actually it's good practice. This is going to improve the way you do things. This is going to improve the quality of your services, the way you interact with your customers, the way you responsibly develop technology. So it's kind of moving people much more to saying, well, actually you should be using this not just because you're being told to do it, because it's a regulatory requirement or a compliance requirement. You should be doing it because actually this is the best way to do it.
Absolutely.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much. We have eaten into a bit of the interactive time, but I am going to catch us up. So we're going to have a couple of questions come up on the board now. Does anybody need to see the QR code again before we continue? Okay, if we could just put the QR code up. I'll just give you a minute to do that.
Are we applying AI to Slido to all these questions?
I'm an expert in human interaction. I'm going to see how good I'm actually at it now as we do Laura versus Slido. Okay, then. So if we can go to our first question. And that's quite a quick one, which is, what is the first word that springs to mind when you think of AI? I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, what have we got? Some of that doesn't surprise me, actually. ChatGPT, I definitely expected to be up there. Because you guys overran, I'm not going to pose you this question. We're just going to leave it up there for thought. As usual, robots, fake, Terminator.
I seeded that one, didn't I?
You did indeed, you did. And it's interesting that spell check is there as well, because people don't often consider that to be an AI. Thank you, that's really great. So we're going to move on to our next question now, which is about how many times do you think you have interacted with some form of AI today? 1 to 5 times, 6 to 10, 11 times or more?
Is there a right answer?
You were supposed to revise it for the panel. Okay, so half of you say 1 to 5 times. Okay, so I'm going to go to the panel now that I've got some interesting points and facts on this, I believe. Who would like to go first?
Well, whether I think it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Javier
if
has...
not, I do have some backup stats.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's... Obviously, it depends where you are, in the world, and I think it goes back to... But I think for people living in London, like, for example, if you walk from here to Victoria Station, you are probably going to be... your image is going to be captured by X number of CCTV cameras. You are going to be processed. There are sensors everywhere, like there... pollution. So you are going to be interacting with many things that you may not even see, but everything that we got here, you've just interacted with AI by clicking this in the Slido, because the Slido system at the back end, they're processing, their servers, trying to figure out how to distribute their processing, and all of that is now machine learning. So, yeah, I think that definitely is more than 1 to 5 for most people living in Western worlds, definitely. Yeah, I think that's actively, I think that's a bit less, But if you're using if you're using an Apple phone of the latest generation, you're interacting with AI pretty much. If you use Microsoft Word in any way, pretty much as well, even if you don't use the AI features, you are going to be using something that right now, I think machine learning has been integrated into pretty much every stack of everything into technology. I don't know, if Josh, if you have more thing. Yeah.
I think this just highlights the difference between interaction as an active, as an actor, and interaction as a passive, almost data point. I think for me, the interactions that maybe make the most difference that we are the least aware of are where AI is being used to make a decision about us. So which advert to serve you at any given time, all the way through to whether your mortgage application should be accepted or not. All of these processes, in the back end of them, increasingly, there will be an AI model at least being tested on some consumers to make those decisions. Yeah. So I agree. We are probably underestimating this.
Yeah, the A/B testing, that's something actually when we talk about how to implement everything that we do digitally, in most cases, is part of some sort of running permanent test, where we are always getting one version of whatever the thing is, and someone else getting another one, and depending on our reactions, the thing gets tweaked. So, yeah.
I suppose from a data point of view, a more interesting question would be, how many pieces of your data have contributed to training large companies, very commercially successful AI, and what actual value are we getting from that? Are we getting what we want or not?
Yeah.
I think what it interestingly says is that people are entirely underestimating how many times some form of algorithm is being applied every time you do something.
When you are online.
It's way more than 11. I mean, if you've just been surfing the internet, they'll be checking what you've been surfing and applying that algorithm hundreds of times to serve ads. Sifting through your emails. I mean, it's endemic, if that's the right word. It's embedded, so it's huge. But I think the question is, you raise, it's people consciously knowing they're using it, like they're using ChatGPT or Copilot, versus people that are unconsciously not knowing that they're using it. I think that's a really interesting question.
And that is the concern, I think.
Did anyone actually want to put that they hadn't interacted with AI at all today? Don't be ashamed. Yeah, it's just looking at the stats. So just very quickly, and this is called the optimism bias. It's just the way it always goes in psychology. But 50% of people think that they would have interacted with AI at least once per day, but it's actually believed to be 88% of people. So there is that gap between what is believed the reality is and what it actually is. Okay, so I think we have a little activity now. I think that's what's coming next. And that is, can you tell a real image from an AI image? So we're going to do 2 of these. So one is an AI image, one is a real image. And we're going to do a show of hands, I think, or are we using Slido for it? Can we do it as a Slido?
Use Slido.
Okay. Oh, okay, so we might need to do hands. So it's either yes, no, or I don't know. So if you move to the first one, real or AI.
We can't see it, can we?
So I am just going to do a show of hands if it hasn't come on Slido. Yeah. So the first one, real or AI? So real?
The first.
Sorry, the left, yes.
Yeah.
No, that's AI.
Or Eurocentric. This is we are being Eurocentric.
AI? Okay. And the one on the right? Real?
Yeah.
Both probably.
AI.
The best ones, I'm told, are actually generated.
Oh, you do? Thank you. Then let's see the answers if you've managed to do that quickly. That's quite impressive. Okay. So I know the answer to this one, but not the next one. Oh, it's come up brilliant. So the one on the left is AI generated, and there's some quite classic examples of kind of what to look out for when something is AI generated. It's usually around the hands and the fingers and toes that AI finds quite difficult to generate. A point was made that the children don't look very, they're quite expressionless. But the problem is we give humans all of these examples of things to look out for, but psychologically, when we perceive people, because we're social beings, the first thing we do is focus on faces, because we want to understand, A, is it human, B, what are they thinking and feeling, and that has different levels of processing. So the first one is that we look for the T, and that's the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So then you move on to what's the distance between the eyes and nose and mouth. And you know, that may sometimes give you an idea whether it's AI generated or not. But by saying, well, you need to look at the hands is quite difficult because we've already decided whether it's a human or not prior to even looking anywhere near those things that might tell us. Also things like lanyards, they're quite difficult to place. You'll see them placed over and then will fly off in the air. Bracers are over the coat, not over the top. Earrings might be mismatched, so you might be able to catch that one. But it's not easy, even for somebody that's quite experienced in this. Can we do the next one? Oh, I do know the answer to this one.
Oh my God.
Okay. The one on the left, real? AI generated.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's obvious it's just AI.
The one on the right, real? AI generated. Okay, so we're mostly saying that the one on the left is AI generated, which this should be correct. Yay. Lack of detail in the leaves, which when you look closely, you kind of can tell. And then incorrect bank, well, you've kind of got to know the place to know that. When we were reviewing some of these, a lot of it were like skylines. If you've never been there, how are you supposed to know? But it is in the level of detail, but the problem is we've already made decisions by the time, or we're really busy, so by the time we've actually got to that point, we're not even productive as humans, you know?
Yeah. So what is the definition of AI generated? You know, is it AI generated that you have explained to generate something like this, or is it we've given a picture and it is modified?
It would have been prompt engineered, through Mid-Journey or something like that. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the case. I didn't set those photos up, but that's usually what it is. Okay, so moving on. Okay, we're going to move now to some questions from the audience. I probably rushed through that a little bit, but I really wanted to make sure that we had some time for some questions. So, show of hands. Are you doing the questions? Do you want to come to this gentleman first? Yeah, and then we'll make it over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. Robert Pynchon from UKCPIN. Really interesting discussions this afternoon. Thank you very much to the panel for all that. AI is a child. There's many children in this world with different cultures and beliefs. Is there a framework being decided on a psychological level with regards to how we train these artificial children to make decisions correctly and that are acceptable to us for the various uses that are going to be applied? What is acceptable is the next question, in that, do we want AI flying planes? Do we want it to do heart surgery? Or do we just want it to help around the house type of situations in a non-lethal, fatal outcome situation?
So what do we want to use AI for? What's acceptable? Maybe who actually makes those decisions? Josh?
Thanks. Fantastic question. Look, I think I'm going to try not to give a hand-wavy answer here because it's so tempting to go, well, it depends and it's case sensitive. But I think the answer really is that AI is a tool, right? It's technology like any other. There will be some things that it's exceptionally good at as we've seen, it's very good at producing realistic conversational speech, and lots of copywriters, I think, use it daily for that purpose. It's potentially good at kind of having back and forths with if you are experiencing loneliness. There are loads of places where it could be really, really positive. There are some things that it will always be quite bad at. To take a specific example, conversational AIs like ChatGPT are quite bad at maths. Calculators are very good at maths. We solved that problem in the 1930s. I don't know, when was the calculator invented? A long time ago. But this technology turns out to be extremely bad at adding together long numbers. So I think it will take expertise in individual fields to answer the very good question you pose, which is that are there things that this thing should never be allowed to do? Mm-hmm. And the answer should always be, is it the best technology for that specific use case? Does it pass the tests that we'd set any other system, any human system, any traditional algorithm, quote unquote? It needs to pass those tests, and I don't think we should see it as a kind of panacea that should be slotted in. I don't think that's what you're suggesting.
I'm sorry.
Oh. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there is a lot of work going on to tackle your first questions, like can we work to make these systems more, what they call is aligned, there's this whole alignment, with human values or principles. I think the questions that are there is which values, are we training? So there's a project called Untrained Models where someone has actually decided that restricting the answers that a language model can give you when you ask for something outrageous is a restriction-free expression. So what they're doing is actually untraining the models to actually be, say something racist or sexist, because the companies, they've already been doing a lot of basically fine-tuning and training to restrict the kind of answers that they are doing. So there is both the possibility of, there is a lot of work to train the models. The question is like, which values do we want to align these computers with, and how do we decide that collectively? And then practically what you discover, or what people tend to discover, is that for every effort to restrict or to control what they're doing, there is someone else that managed to somehow jailbreak, generate, access the, what they call, like the system prompts or like the inside of the model to say something that they're not supposed to say, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of it's a complicated process, but the reality is that there is a huge amount of effort. It's a job now for many people actually to do that. Consumer groups maybe should be more involved as well in that process. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you said it's like a child, because I think we should try to stop thinking of it as a human. Thank you. Anthropomorphizing it. It's a tool, and I've also heard it described as an engine, which I find really useful, because then you might, then the concept is we've got really powerful engines, we've got really small engines at different stages. Where do we want to put those engines? Do we want to put them on a child's skateboard, a really massively powerful one? Probably not. Or do we want to put them on our pet? Probably not. But do we want to have, do you want to use it on a jet plane? Yes. And then you can, so if you sort of start to think about it as part of the infrastructure that can power things, you might get to different answers. And I think it does depend. And those decisions on what's acceptable, I think the main thing is that they're made in a more collective and more democratic way than the route at the moment, because it is sort of in its early stages of rollout to consumer uses. Obviously, it's been around a lot longer in industrial or software processes, but for consumer uses, those decisions shouldn't just be made by what could happen, but sort of on what's possible, but what should and what's useful, etc. So I think I'll prefer the engine example to an unruly child.
Could I just say something on the values? Well, the values have been defined some decades ago and agreed by countries, despite some occasionally disrespect them or infringe them. But of course, that's why these at the UN level initiatives are important as recommendations. To be more concrete, you probably would need to have somebody or some institution checking then. But it will depend on the purpose of this new engine or the utilization of the engine for different kinds of purposes, right? But I don't think it is a question of values. The thing is that if you are doing something that is supposed to help, for instance, people renegotiating, people handling their financial services, their banking payments, their mortgage applications, all of that, I think you will find that there is agreement international on key principles. And there, I would suggest that this engine should take this into consideration. Of course, this can be very different if you are, I don't know, deploying something that is supposed to help children to overcome some sort of big challenges, right? Because the users, the beneficiaries have specific characteristics. But the thing is that, of course, you cannot stop innovation and technology. And as we are speaking, there are probably already appearing new technologies and new AI uses in the market. And I think what consumers in general feel is that you are overwhelmed because some are intuitively able to be a little bit clever, more savvy, but others are just overwhelmed with, okay, how many new steps? And then for what? You get confused that this was supposed to be helpful. And finally, I spent twice the time that when I was doing this with a pen and paper, you see? So I think I'm not sure we cannot resolve or we cannot address all these very different issues. Hence the horizontal, high-level, global principles. And then, for instance, principles and concrete content for certain kinds of standards. I heard today our ANEC colleague talking about so many standards that ANEC, the European Voice of Consumers for Standardization, is developing in AI-related issues, very different. So I think you have to get to these nitty-gritty things. And probably you would need to have some sort of assessment after this is in the market for, I don't know, a couple of months, even have users, consumers, and business users, sharing their views. Because this is also it's a learning process, right? Sorry, thank you.
Okay. We have gone 10 minutes over, so you will have to be quick, David.
It will be quick. I completely agree. We shouldn't think of AI as being a human or a child, but if we did, what's the last thing you do with the child? Leave it unsupervised, because I can guarantee it'll burn your house down. I'll leave you with that.
I actually always say AI is like a narcissist, lacks empathy. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody. I'm so sorry we didn't get to any more questions, but are you guys okay to stay afterwards and answer? Because there were so many questions for us. And just thanks to the team, because I've been holidaying in Spain, so this is the first time we've all been together and the first time I've got to look at this. So it's been a really great session, and apologies for going over. Thank you, panellists.